കുറച്ച് റിമൈൻഡ് ബാക്കി വെച്ചിരുന്ന കുറച്ച് കാര്യങ്ങളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, ലൈക്ക് സം ക്ലീനിങ്, സം anime, some work, things like that. Even though majority of the time ഞാൻ ഗെൻഷിൻ്റെ ബാക്കി ഇരുന്ന് കളിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിലും I did some and I'm planning to do some after the stream. So pretty much എനിക്ക് ടൈറ്റിൽ വേറെ ഒന്നും ഇല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് ഞാനിത് വെച്ചതാണ്, ക്ഷമിക്കുക. എനിവേസ് ഞാൻ അതും പറഞ്ഞ് സ്ട്രീം തുടങ്ങാം.
To a lot of movies and TV shows that are among the worst audiovisual media ever produced by humanity, and having suffered through all 4 episodes of historical distortions propaganda docudrama Queen Cleopatra, I can say with confidence that this show is without doubt the most disgusting, disgraceful,
loyal to the soil, blood to
bone. It is not just historically inaccurate, it is an all-out assault on history that knowingly lies about Roman, Egyptian, African and European history, distorts it, blackwashes it, then accuses every historian ever to have studied Cleopatra of committing the very crime it has just spent nearly 4 hours engaged in.
She was an African, and that's a
I'm Jump Master. Woo bloody who, you hooligans! Flies of heaven, this! Time we tear it apart!
By the non-standard.
They want to be my friend.
On the battlefield of culture war. Netflix's Queen Cleopatra has quickly become the most hated piece of media in recent history. In my lifetime, I have never seen a show, series, documentary, video game, book, or album as universally despised as this clumsy, hateful work of distortion of propaganda.
Open wide comes the drill. Tearing it up!
Rating 1 out of 10.
Reloaded. Enemy there. Ace. He's dead. Back shield. Next ring's far out. Quick swordman. Reloaded. No one hides from my drill.
They did, after all, give 9
Rings are distant and closes and jump the crack.
abolition
I
of
killed
slavery.
an enemy.
so he's dead.
In Africa, according to critics, that brutally mediocre slog is a
Eyes on the
They know they can't
Fire
defend
up
it.
those afterburners
However
and
much they
move.
might like to,
Full
they
squad
cannot
down.
risk
Now
what
we
is
can loot
left
them.
of their credibility by
Recharging
siding
shields.
with this trash against the entire internet, the country of Egypt, and thousands of years of history. I cannot, in good conscience, refer to this show under the name
Extended
it
light
has
mag here.
created for
Level
itself,
1.
Queen
I am
Cleopatra,
repairing
and will
myself.
instead be referring to it as
Enemy
Afro
spotted.
Queen. Firstly, because the Afro is the only hairstyle reimagining of Cleopatra has throughout the entire
I am
show.
taking
The purpose
fire.
of
My
this
ultimate's ready to
hairstyle
go.
being to constantly remind the audience of her blackness, just in
You
case they
kill
forget
leader.
during the near
That
4
egg's got a
hour
Maggie-sized target on their back.
shite.
I'm a god.
Queen of kings.
Secondly, because Afro Queen's main purpose is a Greek
Rings closing and we're all
Oh, what?
reloading.
by anyone with access to the internet. But just how historically inaccurate is it? And that aside, is it worth to watch in any way? Spoiler warning, very Netflix have created a huge,
cut the wind this
brand
time.
damaging public humiliation for themselves with Afro Queen, not only by collaborating with extreme far-left Afrocentrist historical distortionists,
I got you, friend.
tripe, but also just because of the sheer ferocious incompetence of the production. Netflix have thoroughly disgraced themselves with Afro Queen, and I think I can speak for at least the subscribers to this channel in wishing Egyptian lawyer Mahmoud Al-Samari success in his lawsuit against Netflix. Netflix, I hereby bestow upon Mahmud the honorary title of Caesar Augustus Mahmud al-Alpha Chad Magnus. Now, before I get laid into Afro Queen, I'm pleased to announce a new sponsor for this channel. The Despot will be entering into a partnership with Netflix. To inaugurate this collaboration, Netflix have decided to debut the trailer for their upcoming docudrama on this channel in this video. Enjoy.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation.
Deploys to set up the lie that
Cleopatra was black.
is obfuscation. They paint a false
Syndicate
picture
put
of
me
a
here to die,
Egypt,
but I just keep on disappointing
It is
them.
immediately apparent that not just Cleopatra has been race swapped, the entire country of Egypt has been race swapped. In my last video, I portrayed a race swapped Scotland as part of a Disney remake of Braveheart, and yet, already,
Introducing
here
your
we are,
champion.
Netflix have race swapped an entire country. Woke media is literally beyond parody at this point.
There were three primary populations in Egypt as a whole: Native Egyptians.
When Maggie says jump, you say, down whose throat?
Skin color.
Slice of heaven, this time we tear it apart.
This is nonsense. Ancient Egypt is not modern history. By the time Cleopatra was born, the ancient pyramids were already very long and had long since bred themselves into an ethnically homogeneous people. By the time period Afro Queen was set, sub-Saharan Africans did not form part of the native Egyptian population. African kingdoms such as Kush did exist far to the south, but Egypt was not an African kingdom in the way this show wants you to believe. Having created a false and biologically impossible narrative of New York City levels of diversity, they have created the setting in which African blood can enter the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty into which Cleopatra was born. They then further confuse the issue by stating,
We don't know her exact racial heritage.
Barrel,
We don't
extended
know
sniper
who
mag.
Cleopatra's mother
Level
was.
3.
It's also uncertain who Cleopatra's grandmother was.
we don't know who all of Cleopatra's parents and grandparents
Next ring's
were, so
far right.
one of them
I'd
must
have
have been
to.
black, despite the fact that she was a Ptolemy and they didn't marry native Egyptians and the Egyptians themselves weren't black.
Brings a
If that's
distance
the
and
case,
closes in
they
60,
changed
cuzzies.
history to make ancient Egyptians black. That is, at best, a historical fantasy set in a fictional alternative history, and yet it is presented as fact. That is the level of
Rings
respect
back. Quit
Netflix
gasbagging.
and Jada
We've only
Pinkett
got
Smith
45 to
have
get
for
there.
their viewers'
Champion's no longer
intelligence.
part of the
They
data
thought
pool, darlings.
that by lying about the demography of ancient Egypt and deliberately confusing the issue of Cleopatra's descent, they could manipulate people into disregarding thousands of years of history and accepting the new Cleopatra, updated for a modern audience.
I am a god. Do not disrespect me.
And this kind of slimy, deliberate obfuscation goes on throughout the show. Here's an example of semantic
Heads up.
wordplay
You
to
killed
try
her.
to confuse the viewer.
She was an African queen.
Well, technically, yes. She was born and raised on the continent of Africa, but is that what the talking head means? Or does she mean African in an
Heads up.
ethnic
The
sense
ring's
of the
moving.
word? The answer is neither. This is an intentional, sleeked conflation
Shall
of
we head this
geography
way?
and ethnography for political
Yeah,
purposes.
keen as a
Also
bee.
bear in mind that by suggesting the native
Enemy
Egyptian
here.
population was
Pleasure
black,
to meet
this
him,
show is
pleasure to kill
libeling
him.
the Arabs who conquered Egypt, suggesting they committed genocide on a vast scale. The only black population native to Egypt today are the Nubians, who live in the country's deep south. They are a tiny minority. The rest are mostly Arabs and some Copts. So, what happened to you know,
Open wide.
well, the
Here comes
obvious
the drill.
inference is that
Care
they were
package.
exterminated by the
Shields
Arabs.
recharging.
It's estimated that the Egyptian population was around 5 million at the time of the Arab conquest. Today, the black population in Egypt is considerably less than 1 million. So,
Loving a
according
frack.
to Afro Queen,
Recharging my
the
shield.
Arab genocide of
grenade.
the African Egyptians that it killed nearly 100
Recharging my shields, cuzzies.
Almost all of Egypt, 5 million black inhabitants. Africa is not just it is a bloodline Bible against all hail Caesar
One step
Augustus
closer to the
Mahmud
champion circle.
Al-Alfred Magnus.
Many
May the
steps to
gods
go.
march with you on your righteous crusade against Netflix. The show next asserts, quite falsely, that Cleopatra's image is subjective to whoever is depicting her, and thus changeable. In an impressive display of historiographical illiteracy, one of the show's skintellectuals says the following.
The appeal of Cleopatra is that we imagine her, that everyone can imagine her in their own way.
No. You do not imagine history. You discover history through extensive, careful research. The parts of history you don't have enough information to know about for sure, you fill in with inference and best guess from evidence that surrounds the part you are filling in. And in any case, we don't need to imagine what Cleopatra looked like. We have contemporary images of her, including coins, sculptures, reliefs, frescoes, and a 1st century portrait of her from Herculaneum dated to the 1st century AD. But, shockingly, these images of Cleopatra were not mentioned in Alfred.
I imagine her. A similar skin color, 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 a similar skin color.
Reflection of myself.
The omission of these images alone is enough to condemn this show as worthless, pseudo-historical filth with an obvious political agenda and no interest whatsoever in examining real history. The fact that Afro Queen is a work of political activism and not a historical documentary is made clear by the hackademics. Jada Pinkett Smith, the producer of this bald-faced lie, has chosen to include in the panel of talking heads. She has gone out of her way to exclude white men from the panel, despite the fact that almost all of the best and most prominent Roman historians are white men, Mary Beard being a notable exception. By the way, anyone interested in actual Roman history should watch Mary Beard's documentaries. The panel in Afro Queen is made up of mostly skintellectuals, intellectuals whose main qualification is their skin color. This is not the first time Netflix has done this. Carl Hart was included on the expert panel for a show called Crack, in which he talked about the socio-political history of crack in the United States, despite not being an expert in that area. But he has dark skin and Rastafarian hair, so I guess that qualifies him for a Netflix documentary. Afro Queen has two very obviously politically motivated skintellectuals. Deborah Hurd, a PhD candidate from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Here is a picture of her proudly sporting a 50 Years of Black Studies t-shirt. And here is the homepage of the University of Nebraska, Omaha Black Studies Department. Let's just read the opening paragraph of their welcome message.
Dear campus and community family, there is a deep-rooted culture in this country called white supremacy, which thrives on black-side crime inferiority, targets black-side crime.
The entire welcome page is written in that language, and it gets much worse. There's a link to the page in the description if you're feeling unusually masochistic today. Shelley, the woman, is, according to her Wikipedia page, an expert in applying black feminist and critical race approaches to the study and teaching of classics. She is a professional historical distortionist. Afro Queen is not panelled by legitimate, well-qualified and experienced historians.
I resisted Cleopatra for a really long time in my scholarly life.
The pain you give me.
Time to kill.
It is panelled by political extremists. The next historical inaccuracy I noticed in the show...
Power?
No, it isn't. Roman 40 BC was the unchallenged master of the Mediterranean. By 50 BC, Caesar had conquered all of Gaul. The only power that could offer any challenge to the Romans was the Parthian Empire, which had very different geopolitical interests to Rome and was not regarded as a long-term threat, though the empires did occasionally war with and cause minor problems for one another. To describe Rome as the emerging power demonstrates an ignorance of the basic history of the period. When the show mentions
the Nile, which had to flood every year in order to produce crops, has not flooded at the same level for several years. Now, this isn't Cleopatra's fault.
It fails to point out that ancient Egyptians would have regarded a weak Nile flood as a sign that the gods were unhappy with the ruler. Egyptians paid taxes to a class of priests to worship and make sacrifices to the gods on their behalf. If the Nile wasn't flooding, Egyptians would have felt that their taxes were being wasted and the pharaoh was likely to blame. but none of this is mentioned. Afro Queen is very short on detail. It has an agenda. If the details can be twisted to serve that agenda, they will be.
It's also uncertain who Cleopatra's grandmother was.
If they can't, they will be discarded.
Reflection of myself.
Distortionist gives us our next historical anachronism when she states,
So there's a civil war going on in Rome. Once again, it's about power. It's two men.
of course, two men. Women didn't have armies or political power in ancient Rome. Her choice of the word man suggests that a woman might have challenged for power in ancient Rome, and even if this was just a poor word choice, it really does emphasize just how much of a hack this woman is. She doesn't say patrician or general or successful military leader. She says
two men.
No detail, no historical or political context at all. That is this show's panel in a nutshell. Lazy, inarticulate, no real expertise in the subjects they're discussing. We see reimagined Cleopatra training with the sword when she is in exile in Syria, because this 21st century version of Cleopatra is a Mary Sue, yes girl, boss bitch, slay queen. Excuse me, slay queen. Strong, diverse female character. Not being content merely to be a historiographical disgrace, film study student, this show insists on shoehorning in every modern woke movie possible. Mary Sue, boss bitch warrior.
Reloading.
Emotionally incontinent men. Evil white man. Evil racist white man.
To enjoy dragging you through the streets.
Mary Sue, boss bitch, attacking evil white man. Idiot white man looking to strong, diverse female character for guidance.
What's unlike Cleopatra? What?
Men in proximity to Mary Sue turned into morons to make Mary Sue look even more powerful by comparison.
Allegiance is to the general, not.
You will do well to remember what I bring to the table.
Oh, you did. Talk to me like.
If you disagree with any of this, you're a racist. Fourth wall break.
She was an African queen, and that's a fact that's been very erased, whitewashed.
As much as Afro Queen is Afrocentrist bilge, it's also a feminist power fantasy, much as The Woman King was a feminist power fantasy. See this scene of a 56-year-old Viola Davis holding her own against a guy who looks like a heavyweight boxer. The only thing missing from reimagined Cleopatra's warrior slay queen scene is a lightsaber lesson from Mary Sue Palpatine. There is not a single scene in this docuseries that features only men speaking with one another. This is the ancient Roman world. Egypt was a client state of Rome. Mark Antony and Octavian were the two most powerful men in the Roman triumvirate, which divided the empire into jurisdictions ruled over by Octavian in the west and Antony in the east, and Lepidus in West North Africa, but he was a minor player. The two main triumvirs, Antony and Octavian, met regularly and held peace conferences to extend the triumvirate as an alternative to civil war. Cleopatra was politically invested in all of this and would have had spies in both Octavian and Antony's camps, and almost certainly acted as a political advisor to Antony, as she was more politically astute than he was. But none of this is even mentioned in Afro Queen. None of it serves the show's purpose of deifying Cleopatra as a feminist messiah and African queen version of the Mary Sue character that infests so much of modern media. And let's just speak plainly here, the show's producers, Pinkett Smith and whoever else she managed to break out of hell to make this show with her, are anti-white racists. History be damned, they aren't going to have scenes featuring white men talking to each other in their show. The most offensive historical inaccuracy for me personally was the fact that Caesar was given full head of hair. This is one of the great bald men of history, and as a bald man myself, I needed him to be bald so that I could see a reflection of myself reflected back at myself. When I look I can see a reflection of myself. But when they first swapped Caesar, they took away my ability to see myself in Afro Queen. For that reason, I will be referring to the Caesar character in this show as there is also no mention of the fact that Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy XIII, raised an army of almost 30,000 Egyptians and mercenaries and besieged Caesar and 4,000 other stabilized an area of Alexandria. This siege lasted 6 months. In the end, Caesar managed to get reinforcements to Egypt, which forced Ptolemy to abandon the siege. Caesar then joined the reinforcements of his own army and crushed Ptolemy's much larger army. Neither the siege nor Caesar's victory is mentioned in Afro-Queen. The show describes this war as if it was an entirely Egyptian affair that was won by Cleopatra, and Cleopatra alone. It does this by describing the war briefly and in extremely vague terms. Afro-Queen appropriates Caesar's victory and gives it to their updated Cleopatra because it does not want to mention male achievement. Any achievement in this show must be attributed to reimagined Cleopatra. Another very important reason Afro-Queen refuses to mention Caesar's rescue of Cleopatra is that, in modern content, a woman can never be saved by a man, and if history disobeys this current era rule, then history will have to be updated for a modern audience. Afro-Queen suggests that Cleopatra was the sovereign ruler of an independent state that was in a voluntary alliance with Rome, when in reality Cleopatra was a puppet queen placed in power by Caesar following his destruction of her internal political and military enemies. But even before Cleopatra was born, Egypt was already only nominally independent. Rome didn't annex Egypt as a province because they would have had to kill the entire Ptolemaic dynasty to do so, which they didn't want to do because the Ptolemies owed Rome a massive amount of money. The Romans also didn't want to have to deal with an uprising in Egypt that would inevitably follow the abolition of the Egyptian royal family. And being pragmatists, the Romans knew that if it's not broken, don't fix it. Egypt was immensely wealthy and Rome was profiting from this wealth. There was no good political or economic reason for Rome to turn Egypt into a province, which is why they instead chose to retain it as a puppet kingdom. But Afro-Queen, unsurprisingly, mentions none of this. In the alternate slave queen version of history that Afro-Queen inhabits, Cleopatra was the powerful ruler of an independent African kingdom, and the mighty woman king bowed to no man. And if history says otherwise, then fuck history. The regime decides history now. Not the historical sources, not 100 million Egyptian racists. The regime will tell Egypt what their history is. The erasure of achievements Cleopatra's male contemporaries is not limited to Not My Caesar. We see the same treatment with Mr. Cleopatra, this show's version of Mark Antony, and Moctavian. Neither Mr. Cleopatra nor Moctavian are intended as honest attempts to portray like reimagined Cleopatra, Mr. Cleopatra, and Moctavian are characters in Cleopatra's character is intended to portray the historical figure as an African queen of deific genius, whose downfall was entirely the result of the male incompetence she was surrounded by. Not My Caesar, Mr. Cleopatra, and Moctavian are intended as mockeries and diminutions of the historical figures under whose name they are marionetted around the set of this diabolical abomination. Just as there is no mention of Caesar's conquest of Egypt, Antony's military achievements are also omitted. When discussing Antony's invasion of Parthia, Afro-Queen describes it thus.
The Parthians it's a disastrous campaign from Mark Antony. He loses thousands of men.
There is no mention of the fact that Antony led a very difficult and successful retreat from Parthia, holding his army together when it could easily have fallen apart from desertion and guerrilla attack under a lesser leader. A general who was able to keep his cool under severe pressure, hold his army together and carry out a successful retreat in the face of constant enemy harassment, is dropped out and replaced with
I said, do not discard him with him.
Nor is there any mention of Antony's conquest of Armenia in the aftermath of the campaign, during which he captured the Armenian king who had betrayed him. This was followed by Antony's triumph in Alexandria, but making the viewer aware of any of this entails the danger of allowing Antony to look good, of depicting him for what he was, a very capable general and strong leader. Instead, Afro-Queen decides to depict Antony as just another white male incompetent, buzzing uselessly around the immaculate African queen, and mentioning that Antony returned to Alexandria in triumph, literally, would deprive the show of inserting this fictional scene into history.
Act like you know what you are.
What am I, Cleopatra? What am I?
You are
Ring shrinks in 10 seconds.
The defeated, emotionally incontinent, useless, drunken idiot white man must be held together by the strong, powerful Queen. And apparently, the man who conquered Gaul alongside Julius Caesar and vanquished Caesar's assassins in another war needs to be reminded by a melanated sister, in the words of Afro Queen's director, of his martial abilities. This reimagined version of history is much more suited to modern audiences and fits nicely with this show's approach to history, discarding all facts that have no political utility. In a scene showing Reimagined giving birth, Jada Pinkett Smith's voice asserts the following.
Women must face dangers no man ever will.
Yeah, never mind the 20,000 Roman men who fought and risked death to save Cleopatra's life and the throne, or the 30,000 men who were just annihilated on the other side of that dispute. Facing any real danger in this world are the women. Also, is this documentary suggesting that men can't give birth?
Birthing person must face dangers no man ever will.
That's better. By the way, the Julian calendar is black now.
Julius Caesar also adjusts the Roman calendar. The ancient Egyptians were consummate astronomers, and they had created a very effective solar-based calendar. The origin of our calendar, and one that Julius Caesar
Here is a brief explanation of why we was the Julian calendar is, in fact, another Afrocentric convention manufactured by this show. The Julian calendar had nothing to do with Cleopatra. Caesar enlisted the help of a Greek, Sosigenes of Alexandria. The subsequent Julian calendar they came up with was based on the Greek 365-day calendar, but altered. Some months were given 31 days at February's expense because February was the month dedicated to the worship of underworld gods, and February was given an additional day every 4 years. It wasn't a copy of the Egyptian calendar, which had 12 months of 30 days and 5 others to be added manually. But Afro Queen has decided that none of that happened, so the Julian calendar can be African. Also, bear in mind that there is not a trace of historical evidence that Caesar consulted Cleopatra during the formation of the Julian calendar. This is simply a lie, spun from whole cloth by the creators of this show. The show does mention the donations of Alexandria, in which Antony gifted Roman lands to Cleopatra, which were given at Antony's triumph in Alexandria, but manages to omit the triumph itself. This is how Octavian's reaction to the donations is described in the show.
You know that emoji where the head explodes? That's Octavian when he hears about the donations of Alexandria.
No, Octavian was aware that a civil war between him and Antony was inevitable. The donations were practically irrelevant to him because he had no access to Antony's triumviral lands, and the Roman Senate rejected the donations, asserting Roman sovereignty over those lands. What the donations of Alexandria did give Octavian was a massive boost to his propaganda campaign against Antony and a casus belli to declare war. Octavian would have been delighted when he heard about the donations of Alexandria, but an accurate depiction of Octavian's political genius would interfere with this show's determination to depict every white male as a moron incapable of controlling himself.
Get him out of here now! Who do you think you are, Cleopatra?
Who did this?
Following Octavian's declaration of war, we get this scene.
Octavian's mistake is how much he underestimates us.
This exchange suggests that Antony and Cleopatra were underdogs, when in fact Octavian was the underdog. The Eastern Empire, particularly the Roman client kingdom of Egypt, was considerably more wealthy than the West. Antony had a massive army and navy, and the money to pay for it. Octavian had bled the Roman people dry through taxation to pay for his army and navy, which made him unpopular and had caused massive riots. He was in enormous debt to his soldiers, had a smaller and less experienced army than Antony, and, by his own admission, was not a good general. Odds favoured Antony, not Octavian, but this show needs an excuse for why the powerful African
Queen of Kings
lost to a clueless white man, so they falsely portray her as the underdog. Afro Queen's description of the Battle of Actium is not so much historically inaccurate as it is a holocaust of truth. This show has a narrative that Cleopatra was an unassailably brilliant African queen, and so it has brutally twisted the Battle of Actium to fit that narrative. They begin The reality is that the Battle Battle of Actium was the final, desperate act, probably a breakout attempt by Antony, following a series of smaller battles and defections during the Actium War, all of which Octavian and Agrippa won. By the way, Agrippa, Octavian's brilliant admiral and the architect of Octavian's victory over Antony, was not mentioned in this, but an all-out battle allowed this show because white male achieved were bad, and more importantly, to avoid explaining why this sublime act was repeatedly defeated by prior to being located at Actium. After Queen also declared that
doesn't sit well with all of Antony's generals, some of whom don't want to take orders from the king.
This is a lie. Plain and simple. Cleopatra was not giving commands during the War of Actium. The Roman generals are depicted as morons who allow their fragile male egos to get in the way of military affairs. In reality, the Roman generals didn't want Cleopatra there because they felt it would demoralize the Roman soldiers in their army and encourage them to defect to Octavian, which is exactly what happened. Cleopatra's presence also allowed Octavian to betray the war not as a civil war, but as a military decision, which would make the Roman people much more willing to tolerate the heavy taxation that had been imposed on them by Octavian to pay for. The main reason Cleopatra was there is because she was paying for Antony's war, and most of the troops in Antony's army were not Romans, and her presence was a strong moral boost for them. But all things considered, with the benefit of hindsight, Antony would probably have been better off if he had left Cleopatra in peace. So, as it turned out, the Roman generals didn't want Cleopatra there, were probably right. However, he would be shocked to learn that Antony does not see suspension. By the way, when Mr. Cleopatra steps in to put these out of control sexist generals in their place.
Thank you, Isis, for providing us with the world's most invincible naval fleet.
Afro Queen reminds us that reimagined Cleopatra didn't need a man.
Got this shit, bro.
What do you mean, once the battle? The war of Actium was already lost by this stage. This was a breakout attempt, not a decisive battle. And how exactly did Antony and Cleopatra's navy end up in this extremely unfavorable position, bottled up in force with the enemies impeding their exit? This show doesn't seem
Cleopatra and Mark Antony both made a series of problematic battle decisions.
Firstly, this is Orwellian language. She can't say military blunders because reimagined Cleopatra is in command here, and she doesn't make military blunders, but there could be some
problematic battle decisions
happening around her. Also, Antony found himself in this position not due to battle decisions he made. Antony hadn't fought a battle at this stage. His admirals had been defeated several times at sea, and Agrippa had defeated the garrison of Tony, an important port of logistical supply for Antony, but Antony had not himself been present during any of these defeats. The reason Antony and Cleopatra found themselves because of strategic blunders they made. They routed a massive army that depended on a long supply route. Octavian avoided battle with the army, and Agrippa destroyed the supply route and bases of logistical support with his navy. It was not
problematic battle decisions
that landed Antony and Cleopatra in this mess. It was bad strategy. The breakout, which is mischaracterized by Afro Queen as a single decisive battle, was reasonably successful. Both Antony and Cleopatra escaped along with their war chest and perhaps a third of their warships. This was a decent result given that before the breakout they were in danger of total defeat. During the breakout attempt, we are treated to girl boss reimagined starting orders. This is a particularly slide. A one the size of reimagined would not be audible in the midst of this level of noise. The only voice that would carry would be that of a big, burly, angry Viking. And I don't care that Vikings did not exist at this point in history. A berserker shouting orders on this ruined ship would still be more historically accurate than today. The show asserts that Cleopatra fled the battle in order to protect and characterize it thus.
Did what I had to do to protect what is mine.
Cleopatra's thinking about herself and her own power. She's putting herself in her family first.
I made a decision and I stand by it.
Her primary goal remains the safety of her own fleet, the safety of Egypt. She has no choice.
While Antony's retreat is described as an act of
to do to protect what is mine.
While the cowardly white man
flees.
This in spite of the fact that they both did the exact same thing, retreated from a battle they could not win. According to this show, Cleopatra made the unilateral decision to retreat to Egypt, and Antony fled after her, like a dog running after its master.
Wait for me, sir.
Let's just consult the Wikipedia page on the battle before it too is updated for a modern audience. Current iPhone, if you would.
Seeing that the battle was going against Antony, Cleopatra decided to follow Antony's original orders and put their squadron of ships and tried to penetrate Octavian's center. As the gap opened in a grip of blockade, she funneled through. Antony then issued orders for his entire fleet to break through Octavian's lines. Antony led the breakthrough and his spearhead was able to penetrate Octavian's center. However, shortly after Antony's breakthrough, Agrippa ordered his flanks to attack the rest of Antony's ships from both sides. Antony and Cleopatra could only watch on helplessly as their fleet, once the largest in Roman history, was destroyed. The couple was forced to take their remaining 90 ships and retreat to Alexandria.
But describing the battle as it actually happened interferes with the narrative. Much better to have Mr. Cleopatra argue petulantly with the real head of the family.
How dare you?
If Antony had a ship for every historical inaccuracy, he would have won the war. Up to this point, Afro-Queen had taken a wrecking ball approach to history, but with its treatment of Augustus, the first Roman emperor, who at the time of Afro-Queen's setting was known only by his given name, Octavian, the show takes what can only be described as a torture chamber for a soldier. The depiction of Octavian is nothing short of character assassination. Before I get into Afro-Queen's he brought Rome's period of civil wars to an end and transformed a decaying republic into a thriving empire. He founded the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace which lasted 200 years. He repaired and rebuilt temples throughout the empire, lifting the morale of the people and reviving the spirit of Rome. He ended arbitrary taxation, which had caused resentment among taxpayers and encouraged riots and even revolts. Augustus imposed consistent, direct taxation on the provinces of the empire. This financial system was far more effective than any implemented system. The spur, consistent, predictable taxation greatly increased net revenue, helped to pacify the empire's populace and stabilize the economy. He abolished tax farming, that is, he made it illegal for the Roman government to sell taxation rights to private individuals, who would then often brutally use these rights for enrichment. Tax barons were replaced with a salaried civil service. He improved the reliability and quality of Rome's currency, which led to a huge increase in trade, enriching the empire at all levels of the socio-economic hierarchy. He expanded Rome's fleet network, and overseeing the construction of the Temple of Caesar, Temple of Apollo Palatinus, the Forum of Augustus, the Temple of Mars Ultor, Baths of Agrippa, Arch of Augustus, and the Arapacis, an altar dedicated to Pax, the Roman goddess of peace. He secured order in Rome with the introduction of a police force and a military force. He significantly expanded the territory of the Roman Empire, annexing Egypt as a province and conquering or subjugating northern Spain, North Africa, Asia Minor, Greece, Central Europe, the Holy Land, and the Black Sea coast. Augustus is regarded as perhaps the greatest of one of the great leaders of history. This is how Caesar Augustus, founder of Pax Romana and first emperor of the Roman Empire, is depicted in Afro-Queen.
Looks like the African sorcery further this time. Pharaoh, your witchcraft must be very children, just like my child, especially your eldest. You should see my chance. I'm going to enjoy dragging you from the street. Those bastard half-breeds of yours, they're gonna watch. Get him out of here now!
Short-tempered, emotionally incontinent, squeaky-voiced, prickly, evil, racist, sadistic, angry, and just in case the audience doesn't get the message that Octavian is a wretched, wicked little creature to be scoffed at, Reimagined reminds us with this line.
You're a lot shorter than I thought you'd be.
Despite the fact that this line makes no sense, Cleopatra would have known exactly how tall Octavian was from descriptions she would have heard and read of him, and may even have met him in person during one of her trips to Rome. And also, is this show suggesting that short stature is something to be laughed at? Should we all just be laughing at dwarves because they're so small? They're trying to depict Cleopatra as noble and clever here, but she just comes off sounding like a juvenile, pathetic bully. Afro Queen's character assassination of Octavian is entirely politically motivated. White man evil, strong, powerful, defiant, girl boss, African queen, good.
She doesn't crumple at that point.
And how exactly do you know what her emotional state was at this point?
I remember my grandmother saying to me,
forget it.
Rome tapped the Bank of Egypt and impoverished it.
I fucking can't even, man. Karen, iPhone, help me out here, please.
For the first century following the Roman conquest, Egypt functioned in the Mediterranean world as an active and prosperous Roman province. The value of Egypt to the Romans was considerable, as revenues from the country were almost equal to those from Gaul and more than 12 times those from Judea. Its wealth was largely agricultural. Egyptian grain supplied the city of Rome. The country also produced papyrus, glass, and various finely crafted minor arts that were exported to the rest of the Roman Empire. Trade with Central Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and India flourished along the Nile, desert routes, and sea routes from the Red Sea port of Berenike. Goods and cultural influences flowed from Egypt to Rome through Alexandria, which Diodorus of Sicily described as the first city of the civilized world, in the 1st century BC. Its great library and community of writers, philosophers, and scientists were known throughout the ancient world.
Impoverished it.
Egypt functioned in the Mediterranean world as an active and prosperous Roman province.
Impoverished it.
This show has a current year political narrative to push. Evil white colonizers oppressing the native African inhabitants of this African country and brutally exploiting them. And if history says otherwise, then history can go
impoverished it.
They even show an image of the ruin of the Sphinx when one of the talking heads is relating the impoverishment of Egypt. The Sphinx and the pyramids were already ruins when Alexander conquered Egypt 300 years before. That is how profoundly old they are. But Afro Queen chooses to anachronistically shoehorn in an image of the desiccated Sphinx as if to suggest that it was Roman exploitation that led to its demise. Disgusting and deliberate vandalization of history for political purposes.
Cleopatra is framed as this great seductress,
as a temptress, drunk witch. It's misogynistic and it's xenophobic.
This coming from an unqualified idiot who collaborates with Afrocentrist extremists to manufacture a lie about an ancient Greek queen's life and identity in order to turn her into a tool of modern political propaganda because white people bad. Oh, and 100 million Egyptians also bad. They're
xenophobic.
But they're an afterthought.
When it comes to my people, we seem to be erased.
Xenophobic, misogynistic, xenophobic, misogynistic, xenophobic.
And idiots' criticism is anachronistic. You cannot deploy slurs that were invented 5 minutes ago for usage in a contemporary information war as libels against ancient people who lived in a profoundly different world with a profoundly different understanding of morality, religion, and society. Calling ancient Romans
xenophobic
would be like calling Jesus demonophobic for expelling Legion from the man they inhabited.
I use they and them as my pronouns.
We next get some girl boss moments from Reimagined.
She sends him off to the next battle.
Apparently Cleopatra was the supreme military commander of Antony's forces, and Antony's was hers to command. This isn't true, but to hell with truth, I suppose, because girl power.
She sends him off to the next battle.
By the way, this is wrong. Antony won a small engagement close to Alexandria. The next battle was the siege of Alexandria itself. Regarding Antony's suicide,
Mark Antony has attempted to commit suicide after receiving a note from Cleopatra. We don't know what was in that note. Shakespeare would have us believe Cleopatra fabricated her own suicide.
Ah yes, Shakespeare, that white male hack, author of such trash as Macbeth, King Lear, The Tempest, and Hamlet. We shouldn't believe anything he wrote. We should believe the professional distortionist, author of such great and renowned works as Black Feminist Thought and Classics, Remembering, Reclaiming, Re-Empowering. Be not afraid of the dark, critical race theory and classical studies, scientific racism, representing reality, provincial women as tools of Roman social reproduction, and When I Enter, disrupting the white heteronormative narrative of librarianship. Truly timeless works that would have caused Cicero himself to weep with envy.
At last, someone who has bested Cicero.
By the way, Distortionist, how is it that you know the exact details of Antony's death?
My grandmother.
Forget I asked. Let's just move on.
Cleopatra is probably feeling defiant.
How do you know this? She killed herself days later, so it's fair to assume that she was at the very least feeling somewhat despondent. I am loath to ask, but what source did you consult that related Cleopatra's behavioural comportment at this time?
My grandma.
We are next informed of the brilliant, complex Byzantine plot hatched by Cleopatra.
She has a plan. Cleopatra always has a plan.
Killing yourself isn't a plan. Plan suggests difficult and complex prior organisation. Suicide does not require these things. Suicide is a final act, not a game of 4D interdimensional chess.
She decides how she's going to die.
No, she chooses from a very limited range of options, limited due to the fact that she has been utterly vanquished by Octavian and Agrippa.
She is in control.
No, she isn't. That's the point. That's why she's killing herself, because she has lost all control. Her kingdom has been conquered by Octavian. Antony is dead, her children's lives and her life are in the hands of Octavian. She has less control over her own life than a common peasant.
Her granddaughter marries into the Roman imperial family.
We was the Roman emperors, also we was the pyramids, the Sphinx, the Egyptians, Cleopatra, and the Julian calendar.
She has become an icon.
That statement is the only part of this calamity that is true, but not in the way the talking head intends. Reimagined Cleopatra, the one-dimensional feminist messiah character of this show, has become an icon. A symbol of woke Hollywood's intellectual depravity, cultural imperialism, historical revisionism, vicious racialization of everything, of their anti-Western, anti-white agenda, and their complete disdain for anyone that opposes them, be it what they would term a toxic fandom or a nation of over 100 million people. When, in the near future, race swaps have become unfashionable and are looked upon with universal disgust, Afro Queen will be an iconic symbol of that dark period of American cultural history.
I resisted Cleopatra for a really long time. I said, I am not going to study you. I am not going to study you.
Yes, your ignorance of Cleopatra has been made clear throughout the course of this historiographical apocalypse.
She was an African queen. That's a fact that's been buried, erased, whitewashed. Buried, erased, whitewashed.
Now, if that isn't the activist hacked skintellectual calling the Greek Queen back. Afro Queen has absolutely bombed. It peaked at number 4 on Netflix and fell out of the top 10 within 5 days of its release, which is an utterly pathetic performance. And although its failure is financially meaningless, the production budget could not possibly have exceeded $200. It is a well-deserved humiliation for Netflix and for Jada Pinkett Smith. The creators of Afro Queen have spat on the story of Cleopatra by reducing her to a blackwashed prop in a culture war. They declared war on history, determined to turn Egyptian history into an Afrocentrist comedy, and they lost so supremely that even the critics, the same establishment punks that rallied around the woman king, didn't complain because they knew that it was a loss. It is not an exaggeration to say that the rejection of Netflix's cultural distortion has been universal. It has been met with, to use the official metric of Metacritic, overwhelming dislike. And that's putting it very mildly. Watching Jada Pinkett Smith and Netflix being publicly humiliated for their assault on history has been a true pleasure to watch. If ever a show deserved to feel, it was Afro Queen. Glory to everyone who rejected Afro Queen. Glory to Rome. Glory to Caesar Augustus, Mahmoud al-Chad. Thanks for listening, subscribe, and don't forget to blackrock the like button. aggressor, France was not able to gain international support and was left militarily and diplomatically isolated. France proceeded to do everything wrong over the course of the next 6 months, and in January 1871, German soldiers paraded victoriously through the streets of Paris. Napoleon III had abdicated, and French power and prestige lay in ruins. The French performance in the Franco-Prussian War was a masterclass in field leadership and botched execution. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is the cinematic feature. And the result is every bit as calamitous of 1870. In this video, I will not be discussing everything that Indy 5 does wrong. YouTube servers do not present characters and Indiana Jones movie has 5 main characters: Indy, his main adventure companion, sidekick, villain, and for example, in Indiana Jones the Temple of Doom, the companion is the sidekick is Short Round, the villain is Ram, and the MacGuffin is the Sankara Stones. In Indy 5, Disney Lucasfilm gets all of the main characters, including Indy himself. And the plot is a disorganized shambles of incoherent chaos that would make a mid-19th century battlefield cohere an exemplar of order in Paris. Disney Lucasfilm seems to think that any man over the age of 50 must be depicted on screen as incompetent, almost entirely useless, or a young woman to inject meaning back into the entirely a middle-aged Obi-Wan Kenobi is depicted as a day worker, barely able to use a lightsaber anymore because he's given up on his career. This despite the fact that as an old man, Obi-Wan saves Luke and he was provided to man to get vital White Side 2 guys have here's fires down the Death Star tractor beams and faces down Darth Vader. He may well be not like himself in his hands, but ultimately he succeeds in his mission to join the Rebel Alliance. This same character was depicted thusly by Disney.
Take this. Walk into the middle of the desert and bury it in the ground. Stay vigilant.
In his case, it was likely jumping around the subject. Like, someone on the other team got owned. Motivator. That's okay. I'm not going to talk about what Disney did to Luke Skywalker because there are planetary systems that have not been examined. I will just show you 2 clips from Return of the Jedi, followed by a few clips from The Last Jedi. Here is the Skywalker. Here is Disney Luke Skywalker. Returned from an utterly brutal bounty hunt, murdered money into
You'll start getting jokes too? Twice the carnage. Forgive me, Master. I must go all out.
Han Solo is portrayed almost exactly the same as he is portrayed.
Someone on the other team got owned.
He's word-weary, divorced, he's lost all drive, and is just going through the motions while he waits to drop. He's done with adventuring for the good guys, and he has lost his son. In Indy 5, his son is killed in Vietnam, and in The Force Awakens, his son has become a genocidal Imperial who now calls himself
That's
Kylo
my boy right
Ren.
there.
In
He
both
can frag
movies, he is
anyone.
awakened from his stupor of moral indifference and inactivity by a feisty, young, English-accented brunette. Similar treatment has
give you that one.
On Disney Plus. Its debut coming in less than 1 month. Quick aside here, Secret Invasion is a series of AI architecture that is so generic and forgettable that it sounds like it's created by AI. And it is shocking. It looks like an art project thrown together at the lab by a 5-year-old boy who was relieved when he gave it a C-, but he also feels guilty because he and everyone else in the class knows in honor of Secret Invasion, innovative use of AI, the next minute of this video will be comprised entirely of AI because being the former hero who is now little more than an old, pathetic husk of his former self is itself an old, tired, pathetic trope that audiences are thoroughly sick of. They can see their childhood hero turned into an alcoholic who is easily fooled by a feisty young woman no one asked for, or to see the man who once pulled a blaster on Darth Vader being schooled in how to use many problems while he jumps up under Darth Vader. Skywalker taking the green milk from the tip of a bean. We won't say get weaker as we age. No one expects Superman to be dead and up. But there is no good reason that a great character, short of going senile in old age, should become gullible, stupid, all-round less confident, and develop personality traits. In a lecture to your students, it is obvious that Dr. Jones has lost his doctorate, and instead of the enraptured Jewish decade path, his audience is now a hall of indifferent students who literally not see Dr. Jones. Shaw, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who behaves like an uninvited house guest who not only overstays her welcome, but quickly decides that she is now the owner of the house and that those who live inside it must pay her due deference. This character convinces Indy to show her the dial by reintroducing herself to him in a bar. Remember me? I'm your goddaughter, and presenting him with the prospect of a last great adventure. Indiana Jones is a man who has decades of experience with liars, cheats, and thieves.
It's a trap.
Dr. Jones.
Let me try for a sec.
Again, we see there is nothing you can possess which I cannot
Someone on the other team got owned. Double the kills, double the bells.
It does not allow sentimentality to lie with judgment.
That wasn't very casual.
Get out of here now. They'll start combing the place for us.
Get out of here!
But in Indiana Jones and the Dark Sea, he quickly casts aside all doubts about this woman claiming to be his goddaughter, who he last saw when she was 12, and takes her to see the dial she has expressed such enormous interest in. Indy is shocked when this woman he has known for 5 minutes, and who suggested they go search for the Dial of Destiny together, steals the dial from him. Smug one-liner and fun. So these are our two, and extremely gullible, depressed, borderline alcoholic man and a thieving woman. We will soon be introduced to a third member of the gang who manages to be just as unpleasant a screen presence as the interloper, but more on him later. Helena Shaw is the new character no one wanted, but Kathleen Kennedy decided everyone wanted, and needs to see on screen in Indiana Jones. And the first thing she does is screw over Indy, rob him, and leave him for this is definitely the part of the violence and why did Indy later forgive his suspect of 5 minutes ago? Why did he cross and that is by far the biggest problem live up to her father's legacy and be an adventurer like Indy, she confesses all and tells Indy everything, which gives him a clue as to where the bad guy might be. Later on, Indy can call her and ask her to do something. Eager to please herself, she later reports back to him on not in person, the results of her findings, which leads Indy on to she's almost every scene that has been. In the first movie, Invaders of the Lost Ark, doing what men do. Solving puzzles, finding solutions, and being objective. But it's no wrong time of Guided Destiny, Indiana Jones left to be Indiana. Instead, we have this spread between everything. Throughout the entirety of this movie, Indy's intended replacement clings to him like a bad smell, and she doesn't understand him in any way. She has no skills that he does not already possess. Indy can jump over a big running, she can spider person single-handedly take on a moving convoy of German soldiers. She can throw herself on a moving car and strangle the villains while pushing the rifle muscle-bound goons out of her way. He can get a girl angry with a good out pumping them.
Someone on the other team got over.
Can you do it?
You know what you were doing.
She can leave an ex heartbroken and coming after her in tears with an entire convoy of simp allies. He can sneak onto a German base and take out a few bad guys. She can sneak onto a moving plane and take out an entire cargo hold full of bad guys. He can have a funny and adorable sidekick who's about to drive a car. She can have a sidekick who's older and can drive cars very well. Drive anything, kick butt, take out men, force them down to the side, stop the bad guys, do anything else the script needs him to do. Indy creates Rig sheet he has an expert knowledge of and antiquity. She has more expert knowledge of and antiquity. Sidekick is that the sidekick complements the hero in some way. In GoldenEye, the Talia is a computer programmer. She's not an assassin who can shoot enemies, or conceal devices well part of the game, or when it's that skill turns out to be very useful to Bond and allows him to gain vital intelligence on the villain. He also has other uses for Natalia. Natalia complements Bond. There are important reasons for him to keep her around. Let's look at another example of a complementary on-screen relationship, this time platonic and with an age gap comparable with that between Helen Shaw and Indy. Sean and Will are goodwill hunting. Sean provides overview authority, wisdom and mentorship that Will has never had in his life, and Will is young, I'm sure you help. Self-seeking attitude. However, Will is excellent archaeologist, linguist, archaeologist, together into this adventurers playing together and learning and valuable. Her incredible puzzle-solving ability to find clues and seems to possess an inexhaustible supply of stamina and she's got a giant sidekick and she's actually possessing unnatural physical strength and almost suicidal strength, and she leaves a trail of broken-hearted men in her wake. Does this sound familiar? Of course it does. She's Indiana Jones. She's an idealized feminist version of Indiana Jones, but without the humour, charm and charisma. This is why her character doesn't work at all. We already have an Indiana Jones. We don't need another one. Having a not even secondary character, a second main character in the movie with an identical skill set to the titular character is pointless. That would be like having two James Bonds. They would just get in each other's way and turn the movie into a convoluted slog, which is what Indiana Jones and the female Indiana Jones is. An absolute slog. If Hell in a Shaw was, for example, a trainee doctor who could treat the inevitable wounds and injuries that old man Indy will sustain on his adventure, that would be really useful. It would be quite complementary to the character of an adventurer engaging in activities that he is at least 30 years too old for. The secondary but still massive problem with two Indiana Joneses is that both of them are the main character and both require extensive screen time. This is why the movie drags more ass than a cowboy lassoing Lizzo across the Texan desert. As batshit all over the place as the plot is, the movie might have been decent if it didn't have Indiana Jane dragging down every scene she was in, making it twice as long as it needed to be. And setting aside the problems with her character, there is zero chemistry between Harrison Ford and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Now, when I say chemistry, I don't mean sexual chemistry. Not that there would be anything wrong with that. Age is just a number. My man Al Pacino recently welcomed his 5th child into the world at the age of 83 with his girlfriend of 29. Let not age nor any other contrivance of man stand as a barrier to true love. Al, congratulations, King. I believe I can speak for all of the Despot subscribers in wishing you and your family the very best, and expressing our hope that you live long enough for your son to have fond, joy-filled memories of you. You know what's crazy is that 170 years after Al Pacino was born, his son will probably still be alive. That's like if Oscar Wilde's son was still alive today. The chemistry I am referring to when I talk about the vibe between Harrison Ford and his co-star is not sexual chemistry, it's on-screen chemistry. There needs to be good chemistry between the actors in order for their characters to be believable and compelling on screen. Here are a few examples of screen duos that had great chemistry. Miyagi and Daniel-san in The Karate Kid, Doc and Marty in Back to the Future, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke in Star Wars, Clint Eastwood and Hilary Swank in $1 Million Baby, Lecter and Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, Harrison Ford and Sean Connery in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Will and Sean from Good Will Hunting, Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black, and perhaps the most celebrated screen duo in history, Will Smith and Jaden Smith in Lost on Planet Nepotism.
You're wrong!
An actor may be very good for a part, and the director and studio may really like him, but if he doesn't match well with the main actor, he won't be cast. For example, Pat Morita was not cast as Mr. Miyagi until he had auditioned with Ralph Macchio, despite the filmmakers loving his solo auditions. Now, I doubt there is an actress on this planet that could make the character of Helena Shaw compelling. But that aside, there is just nothing going on in terms of chemistry between the two leads in Indy 5. I don't get the sense that they would hate each other. It's not the anti-chemistry of Jai Courtney and Emilia Clarke in Terminator Genisys. Their characters are supposed to fall in love and, in a bliss of passion, produce the future leader of the human resistance to the machines. But Jai Courtney and Emilia Clarke gave the impression that they would not fuck if they were trapped together in a Las Vegas penthouse for a month with nothing to eat but aphrodisiacs and Viagra pills. The problem in Indy 5 is that I never get the impression that the two leads would ever have any fondness for one another, that their characters really care about each other. This becomes painfully blatant near the end when Indy and Indiana Jane are arguing about Indy's desire to stay in the past. The movie wants us to believe that there is a deep emotional connection between these characters, but I just can't believe it. Pat Morita and Ralph Macchio had a magical connection when they performed together in The Karate Kid that makes the movie incredibly immersive. It's one of the reasons the movie became a surprise smash hit. There is no connection between Harrison Ford and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. There is only a giant gaping chasm of nothing. This emptiness between them makes an already unwatchable movie even worse. The Force Awakens is a crap movie, basically just a glossy knockoff of A New Hope, but I can admit that there was good chemistry between Daisy Ridley and Harrison Ford, and it does help the movie limp into the realm of watchability. Harrison Ford and Phoebe Waller-Bridge go together about as well as a wank and a fold-out of Phoebe Waller-Bridge. They are not complementary. The most visually unpleasant aspect of Indiana Jones is the bullshit girl boss choreography in the action scenes, which look like exactly what they are. A ham-fisted attempt to suggest that women are just as capable of action and violence as men, aided by the agonizingly obvious assistance of the stuntmen. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a big, brittle plank of wood with cooked spaghetti noodles for arms. It is obvious that she would not be capable of the physical feats this movie would like you to believe she is capable of. Her roof jump in heels is cringe. Her car chase combat acrobatics are laughable. That whole chase sequence doesn't work. It should have been done in a way that allows for the fact that Indy is a very old man and Indiana Jane is a stick insect in human form. Instead, it chooses to ignore these facts, pretends that Indy is 40 years younger and Indiana Jane is a shredded male gymnast. Suspension of disbelief can only go so far. I can believe that a man who looks like a world-class bodybuilder is actually a killing machine from the future. I cannot ever believe that a woman who looks like the physical manifestation of clumsiness could pursue and harass a convoy of heavily armed mercenaries, jumping between speeding vehicles as she does so because she has to one-up Indy's capture of the truck in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. The choreography in that scene, featuring a stuntman being dragged underneath a truck, is legend. And as for Indiana Jane punching out Indy near the end of the movie,
well, that was fun.
Sorry, wrong clip. That was remade Wendy slapping remade Peter Pan to the ground in another recent Disney production. That's about as convincing as me taking out Tyson Fury with a first round KO.
You're going down, my friend. Yes, sir, Mr. Burns.
The girl boss choreography in Indiana Jones 5 is embarrassing. There is one scene which perfectly sums up Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character. She has just let off a stick of dynamite in the boat, killing several men for all she knows, and Indy's old friend has just been murdered. During the escape from the bad guys, with her piloting the boat, naturally, she begins laughing.
My friend was just murdered.
You know what this reminds me of?
We came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No.
This is the sociopath who was clearly intended by Kathleen Kennedy as a replacement for Indy, and who, in the original ending Kathleen Kennedy wanted, picked up Indy's hat from his still-warm corpse and placed it on her head, signaling that she, Indiana Jane, was the new and improved Indiana Jones. That ending was scrapped by Disney following horrendously bad test screenings. The only time this movie acknowledges that the audience didn't come to see Phoebe Waller-Bridge is at the end, when she excuses herself to give Indy a moment alone with his ex-fling from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Apart from that, she is always there. A constant, obnoxious presence and a reminder that this is a Lucasfilm production and that, however many times it has failed in previous productions, Kathleen Kennedy is determined to replace the heroes of the past with the boring Mary Sues of the present. That is another massive problem with Indiana Jones 5. The story is driven by this interloping, toxic feminist Indiana Jones clone made female. Indy is responding to her suggestions and leadership. He is following her around. She is driving the plot. He leaves New York in pursuit of her and is literally dragged back there by her. He is a passenger on her adventure. Also,
This one made mistakes. And with this,
The diffuser is no longer in your possession.
you stole it. Then you stole it.
When I stole it, it's called capitalism.
no it isn't. That's called feudalism. A system of government based on top-down organised theft. Capitalism is the opposite, a system of government which opposes government theft through taxation and allows individuals to keep the money they have earned. Now on to the third member of our treacherous trio, Knockoff Shorty. Before we discuss the character, let's first talk about the actor. He's fucking terrible. Did I say that kid who played Village Wench's son bad? Kid who plays Village Wench's son, if it's any consolation, as bad as you were, you are an infinitely better actor than Knockoff Shorty. How, in the name of golly, did this guy end up in front of a movie camera? He is lamentable. He botches every single line. even his one-word lines. And when he has to speak full sentences, it's just painful to watch.
What are we doing? Okay, so he's like running the show now. I just thought we were doing this for all the wrong reasons. You know he's never gonna let us sell any of that stuff.
Op 4 eliminated.
His facial expressions don't reflect what he's saying. He doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing with his face or body. He doesn't know how to react to what's being said to him. And his cause is not helped by that ridiculous line of mouse fur under his nose. Obviously, the filmmakers wanted to make knockoff Shorty look cute or endearing in an attempt to ape Shorty from the Temple of Doom, but it just had the opposite effect. It looks bloody awful. Knockoff is supposed to be Indiana Jones' sidekick, but unsurprisingly, there is no chemistry between Phoebe Waller-Bridge and the nominal actor who plays Knockoff. I am absolutely serious in saying that there is more charm, charisma, and humor in Ke Huy Quan's smile in Shorty's character intro in the Temple of Doom than there is in Knockoff Shorty's entire performance. As for the character, he's basically just a cheat code for the script, which it uses anytime it needs something to happen. Indiana Jones needs to get involved in the action during the tuk-tuk chase. Knockoff will drive the world's fastest tuk-tuk through the crowded and narrow streets of Marrakesh. Indiana Jones needs to follow Indy in an airplane. Knockoff will fly the plane that is conveniently fueled up and waiting to go with no impediment to its usage. Someone needs to stop the bad guys from shooting Indy and Indiana Jones. Knockoff will do it. Here, put him on a practically functionless platform at a convenient height from the bad guys and have him jump on top of one of them. Apart from being a cheat code, Knockoff is just a detestable character. In one scene, he gets bored, so he walks over to a random boy and pickpockets him. There is absolutely no need to do this. Indy and Indiana Jones don't need money. Knockoff just does it because presumably he's a habitual thief. Now, Disney think the audience will view this as wily and clever. From Disney's perspective, they're showing off the awesome skills of Shorty 2.0, and the victim of his theft is a white boy dressed in expensive clothes, so presumably he's from a wealthy family. He's just a rich white male, which makes him Dalit in the intersectional caste system. Thus, he is a legitimate target for a thief. If this were a black girl, it would be a terrible crime. But against a rich white boy, it's commendable, an opportunity to show off the new and improved Shorty. In Temple of Doom, we learned that Indy met Shorty in Shanghai when Shorty tried to pickpocket him.
Shorty's family were killed when the Japanese bombed Shanghai on the streets as he was 4. I caught him trying to pick my pocket. Didn't I, short stuff?
Disney think that because Shorty was a pickpocket, it's okay for Knockoff Shorty to be a pickpocket, only Knockoff does it better. What Disney fail to realize is that Shorty being a pickpocket is part of his sympathetic backstory. He stole from strangers because his parents were killed by the Japanese. He's an orphan and theft is his only means of feeding himself. Indy took pity on him and basically adopted him. It is a heart-wrenchingly sad backstory and further endears the audience to Shorty. Knockoff pickpockets because he's a degenerate thief. He commits this crime not to keep himself from starving to death, but for money and personal amusement. He is also more than old enough to know better. Shorty was a pre-adolescent child who didn't know any better. Knockoff is a teenager who knows what he's doing is wrong and doesn't care. Disney are so morally backward that they fail to understand the moral chasm that exists between Shorty and Knockoff Shorty. Shorty acts out of desperation, Knockoff acts out of predation. He is a rotten little scumbag. Indiana Jones is a hateful character, and Knockoff is the perfect sidekick for her because he is fucking detestable. Before I move on, I want to briefly demonstrate what a truly excellent sidekick Shorty is. He's charming, hilarious, adorable, and probably the most likable character in indie canon. Take a look at this joke from Temple of Doom.
Oh, Mr. Wakefield, please. You call him Dr. Jones. Oh, Dr. Jones?
That is wonderful stuff. Genuinely laugh out loud funny. Not just the line delivery, the direction is also perfect. Look at how his head just pops into the frame when he says the line.
You call him Dr. Jones.
Magic. Here's another beautifully filmed visual gag when Shorty imitates Indy's body language. and there is a visual callback to this gag in the movie's final act. Look at the framing. Indy in the foreground taking up most of the shot, Shorty in the background to Indy's right, exactly the same blocking for both shots. Peak Spielberg, and a reminder of just how far Hollywood has fallen. In a perfect world, when Indiana Jane interrupts Indy's quiet drink, Ke Huy Quan shows up in a tuxedo looking like an absolute fucking boss. Says,
"You call him Dr. Jones, dog."
Tells the bitch to get lost, then Indy and Shorty head off in search of Atlantis. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. We live in worst timeline. If anyone watching this video does ever come into possession of the Dial of Destiny, please use it to go back in time and stop George Lucas from selling Lucasfilm to Disney. Just take a copy of The Last Jedi with you and show it to him. He'll cancel the deal at about 10 minutes in. By the way, that line that Ke Huy Quan delivers to that doll who presumed to call Dr. Jones Mr. deserves an award. The winner of the most magnificent delivery of the most fucking based line in cinema history goes to...
debut in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
The MacGuffin in Indy 5 is wrong. It was created by writers who fundamentally misunderstand the role of an Indiana Jones MacGuffin. Describing a MacGuffin from a previous iteration of the Indy 5 script, the director and one of this movie's many writers, James Mangold, said it was, quote,
"Just another relic with power, similar to the relics we had seen."
This is how Mangold views the MacGuffins from the original trilogy, just relics with powers. And his MacGuffin, the Dial of Destiny, was cooler than the previous relics because it was a time machine built by an ancient Doc Brown. At least I think that's what the Dial of Destiny is. I'm honestly not sure if the dial locates fissures in time or creates them. The movie was not clear on that point. If the function of the dial was made clear during the extensive runtime of this movie, I was either too bored to notice or out taking a piss. The MacGuffins in Indiana Jones are not just ancient relics with powers, they were characters in the movie. The most obvious example of a MacGuffin that is also a character is the One Ring in The Lord of the Rings. It talks to characters in the story, tries to seduce them with its power. It is described by Frodo as treacherous. It is regarded by Gollum as a beloved companion, and Gollum warns that the ring wants to return to Sauron. The anthropomorphization of the ring is obvious. Viewers know that the ring is a thinking being with desires and designs. The sentience of the Indiana Jones MacGuffins is far more subtle. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Ark gives off its own golden glow, as if it has a life force. In one scene, it burns the swastika on the crate in which it's being carried, but without destroying the crate. This foreshadows the burning of the German expedition at the end of the movie, but also indicates that the Ark will, of its own accord, destroy evil it comes into contact with. At the end of the movie, Indy and Marion are spared during the Ark's destruction of everyone in the vicinity. They were as close to the Ark's fire as many who were killed by it, and yet they survived. The only explanation for this is that the Ark chose to spare them. We are led to believe that this is because Indy closes his eyes and tells Marion to do the same. But even if this did save them, how did Indy know to do this? That's a very specific method of defense. It's possible he read somewhere during his extensive research that the Ark would destroy anyone arrogant enough to presume to be worthy of its secrets, but it's more likely that the Ark told Indy to close his eyes, or Indy, having his eyes closed, didn't matter, and the Ark chose to spare him of its own volition. There are many indications in Temple of Doom that the Sankara stones are sentient, but I'll give two more obvious ones. When Indy first comes into contact with the stones, his face takes on an enamored, lustful look and is lit up by an infernal red glow. The stone clearly being the source of this demonic light, the red symbolizing Indy's temptation by evil. Shortly after this, he briefly turns evil after being forced to drink the blood of Kali. But was it the blood that turned him evil, or the stones? Or a combination of the two? Later, after Indy captures the stones, he knocks out two very tough-looking guards, literally sending one of them flying. This is the only time in the movie he demonstrates such superhuman strength, which suggests that the stones granted Indy a superhuman capacity for violence in order to protect themselves from being separated again. Indy also performs feats of superhuman strength in Raiders of the Lost Ark, suggesting that the Ark is aiding Indy in his quest by granting him powers beyond ordinary human capacity. The agency of the MacGuffins in Indiana Jones is indicated at the very start of the first movie. When Indy sees a golden Aztec head, it glows with its own light and seems to communicate a warning. And of course, it has a face, indicating that it is a thinking being, which it is, as all the MacGuffins in Indiana Jones are. The relics in the OG trilogy are also of spiritual significance. The Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail are important Christian relics. The Sankara stones are fictional, but they are shown to have immense religious importance and spiritual power. They are also an excellent dark variant on the Ark in the first movie. Rather than just repeat themselves with the relic of light, which they had in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Spielberg and Lucas decided to have a relic of darkness in the second movie. Another essential element of the Indiana Jones relics is that they punish those who seek to misuse them. The German soldiers acting under the orders of the German government who rules Germany from 1933 to 1945, and whose political party YouTube does not like named, are massacred by the Ark for attempting to use it for evil purposes. In the Temple of Doom, the stones, when united, cause insanity in those around them.
Kalima protects us. We are her children. We pledge our devotion to her with an offering of flesh.
This applies not only to the zombie guards who drank the blood of Ali, but to the leaders of the cult. Listen to the World Conquest monologue by Mola Ram, the leader of the Gali cult.
The British in India will be slaughtered, then they will overrun the Muslims, then the Hebrew God will fall, and then the Christian God will be cast down and forgotten. Soon, Kali Ma will rule the world.
This isn't even crazy ambition, it's a hallucination from a man who has been driven mad with the delusion of power. As mentioned, Indy goes crazy after coming into possession of all three stones, and only snaps out of it when Shorty burns him. But even these demonic stones, when separate from one another, can do good. One stone on its own brings life to a village, allowing the people there to thrive. When the stone was stolen from them, the village became a barren wasteland. In The Last Crusade, the Holy Grail destroys the man who dared to presume himself worthy of its power, and who wanted to wield that power for nefarious purposes. But it also has the power to do good when used with moral intention, and chooses to save Indy's father's life. The Grail also gives a final test to Elsa, who has gone some way to redeeming herself by knowingly giving a false Grail to the villain Donovan. But in order to be truly redeemed, she must let go of power-hungry ambition. She is tested and...
Give me your hand! Give me your other hand! Chose poorly.
Indy is also tested, but being pure of heart...
I can almost reach it, Dad. Let it go.
15 seconds. Op 4 eliminated. Mission successful.
The MacGuffin in Indy 5, The Dial of Destiny, doesn't have a personality. It is not a character. It does not enhance the abilities of the bearer. It does not punish those who misuse it, or reward those who use it with pure-hearted intent. It has no spiritual significance. It has no will. It, like the foul movie it inhabits, has no soul. It is just a dead hunk of metal. The Dial of Destiny is a sterile plot device, not worthy of the title of Indiana Jones MacGuffin. For that reason, I, the Despot, by the power vested in me by my subscribers, hereby strip the Dial of its title, Indiana Jones MacGuffin. It shall... a Disney Lucasfilm plot device. Near the end of the movie, we learn that the former Guys Who Lost World War II rocket scientist, generic villain, is heading into the wrong time warp because, despite being a literal rocket scientist, he forgot to take continental drift into account in his calculations when figuring out where he needed to go in order to arrive back in 1939 so he could kill Hitler and somehow win the war thereafter. More on his ludicrous plan later. Generic villain ends up arriving in ancient Syracuse, which is under attack from home. The Syracusans shoot down the plane with anti-naval scorpions. More on that nonsense in the plot holes section of this video. Generic villain and the henchmen that have somehow survived the girl boss badassery of Indiana Jones all die in the plane crash. They died not because of hubris, ill intent, or egotistical delusion, but because of basic incompetence. Indy 5 suggests that if Generic villain had taken Continental Drift into account, he would have succeeded in his diabolical plot to ensure the final victory of the Thousand-Year Reich. This shows that Disney Lucasfilm have absolutely no understanding of the moral heart of Indiana Jones. In the original trilogy, evil is defeated because it is evil. Evil is destined to lose. A moral lesson that is evidenced by Disney themselves, since they are a failing company that is losing badly on the cinematic front of the culture war, a battle that they started in 2015 with The Force Awakens. It is unsurprising that Disney have no understanding of Indiana Jones' basic moral framework. Another important element of Indiana Jones that Disney Lucasfilm got wrong was the villain. Indy 5's villain, Generic villain, is a character template with nothing done to the template. Disney decided that they wanted an evil former guy who lost World War II as the villain. Standard cinema bad guy. Okay, no problem. And now what? Maybe make him hilariously non-self-aware as a basis for great gags?
Thank you, Fräulein. We are not thirsty.
No? Okay. Perhaps he enjoys a drink a little too much and has a soft spot for the ladies.
What is this stuff, Renee?
I grew up with this. It's my family label.
Are you fucking kidding me? A straight white man flirting with a woman in a Disney movie. Alright, he's a highly intelligent opportunist who enjoys toying with his prey and clearly has a strong sadistic streak in him. No? Alright then what? What do you want to do with this bad guy who lost World War II template? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Disney takes a basic film archetype and do nothing with it. Despite having my man Mads Mikkelsen, one of the best villain actors in cinema, the man who played Le Chiffre in Casino Royale and Hannibal Lecter in the quite good but short-lived show Hannibal, Generic villain has no personality to speak of outside of what Mads Mikkelsen brought to the role. He has no habits or interests, or earthly vices, or personal problems, or complex relationships, or odd tics. He's just a bad guy that lost World War II, and his plan doesn't even make sense. He wants to ensure the German victory in World War II. Then why would he go back to 1939 before Germany had even conquered Poland? The best time to go back would be June 1941. The Germans had just conquered Greece and defeated the large British force sent there to help defend the country. This was Germany at the height of its power, but before the disastrous invasion of the Soviet Union, which we know today with the benefit of hindsight, had very little chance of succeeding. Kill Hitler or convince him not to invade Russia, either is fine. But pre-World War II, 1939, here's how Generic Villain's plan should have gone. So as it turns out, in the big reveal, Generic Villain was heavily involved in the medical experiments carried out at Auschwitz, where he was working on a serum that would turn German soldiers into monster warriors. He got close, but the Russians overran the camp before he could finish his work. Now he has perfected the serum and wants to go back in time to give it to Hitler so Germany wins. But when they arrive in 1939, he arrives in a horrendous storm. As it turns out, he forgot to check what the weather was like on that day. The plane crash lands, and as he lies down, he drags the serum towards himself and injects large quantities of it. He turns into a horrifying monstrosity, runs at great speed out of the plane crash straight at Hitler, says,
"For so long, I thought you were the future. I was wrong. I am the future."
Then kills Hitler and declares himself the Fuhrer. The movie ends on a cliffhanger, setting us up for our next movie, Indiana Jones 6, Indy versus the Monster Fuhrer. The villains in Indiana Jones are supposed to be colourful and fun like Major Tut, or larger than life like Mola Ram. generic villain has none of the things that a good villain should be. He is a digestive biscuit served with a glass of water, wasted on a great actor. Anyone who was unfortunate enough to watch this movie in its entirety may have felt that the ending was off. It didn't feel like an ending is supposed to feel. This is because nothing was achieved. Nothing has changed and no one has grown as a character. Indy is still just a depressed old loser. In the previous scene, he didn't even want to return home because he felt he had nothing to live for. He had to be literally taken home against his will by Indiana Jane. He ends the movie as he started it, hopeless. Disney tried to cadence the movie optimistically by tossing in that broad from not Indy's ex-wife from Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, because that movie never happened. But this does not change the nature of the character we have just seen portrayed on screen for 2.5 hours. It's just a ham-fisted attempt to tell the audience that Indy has gone through a meaningful character arc. But we know this is a lie because we just saw the movie and it failed completely to show us that. He didn't go through any arc. Indiana Jane started as a sociopathic, obnoxious know-it-all Mary Sue, and she is exactly the same character at the end, having learned nothing. If anything, she is even more sure of how she is. She should have been punished for her arrogance, presumption, and ambition, as all villains in Indiana Jones are. At the end of The Last Crusade, Elsa is punished for her role in bringing the villain to the Grail, and for her determination to take the Grail not for spiritual purification or the benefit of mankind, but as an archaeological prize that would satisfy her egotistical ambition.
Anyways, ഒന്നുമില്ല, അത്യാവശ്യം ഞാൻ കുറച്ച് നേരം കളിച്ചു. തൽക്കാലത്തേക്ക് സ്ട്രീം നിർത്തുകയാണ്. വേറെ പ്രത്യേകിച്ചൊന്നും പറയാനില്ല. പതിവ് പോലെ ഗുഡ് ബൈ, GG's, and to be continued. Bye bye.